Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, the show where we dive into the microscopic mysteries that make our bodies tick. I'm Ethan Foster, resident observer of the human condition, here to remind everyone that sometimes the most riveting stories take place where you least expect them, like deep inside your cells.
And I'm Alara Sky, the one who pokes at your assumptions like they're free samples at a grocery store. Today, we're exploring a topic that might sound both essential and a bit scary: iron. It's a mineral we need, but apparently if you let it party too long in your brain, it might end up causing mayhem.
So think of iron like that helpful friend who offers to drive you around. But if he refuses to leave the driver's seat for days on end, you'd get uncomfortable. That's basically iron overload, right?
Precisely. You want iron behind the wheel sometimes, transporting oxygen, helping with neurotransmitters, just not hogging the entire car forever. When iron hangs around too long, especially in the brain, we start talking about issues like Alzheimer's disease. It's as if your helpful buddy morphs into a backseat driver who can't stop messing with the controls.
Well, let's ease into this. First, what is it about iron that makes it both friend and foe?
Iron is critical for basic brain functions. It carries oxygen from your lungs to all those busy brain cells. Plus, it helps in the creation of neurotransmitters, those chemical messengers that let neurons share the latest gossip. When everything's balanced, it's fantastic. Your brain runs like an efficient metropolis.
But you said balance, and that's always a tricky concept for us humans.
Exactly. As we age, the system that regulates iron can go slack. Iron doesn't exit gracefully. It starts building up in brain tissue because, unlike other substances, there's no easy exit ramp for excess iron. No neat disposal chute unless you're regularly losing blood. If it accumulates too much, it can disrupt cell functions in ways that make your brain cells feel like they're drowning in clutter.
Let's pivot to the connection between iron buildup and Alzheimer's, which is a neurodegenerative disease that's quite prevalent.
Alzheimer's is that dreaded condition where your memory and cognitive abilities start fading like old Polaroid pictures. Research consistently finds that people with Alzheimer's have higher levels of iron in their brains, and the severity of cognitive decline often matches how much iron is detected.
So, if you look at the worst cases of Alzheimer's, they sometimes have the worst iron buildup.
Bingo. Scientists zoomed in on two proteins typically implicated in Alzheimer's: amyloid precursor protein, often shortened to APP, and tau protein. Under normal circumstances, these proteins help maintain healthy brain function, but in Alzheimer's they misbehave, forming plaques and tangles. Turns out they're also tangled up in managing iron. When APP and tau go rogue, iron regulation goes rogue as well.
So these brain proteins that normally do important housekeeping start hoarding iron, like squirrels frantically hiding too many nuts.
And it sets off a vicious cycle. Excess iron amplifies the damage to neurons, which just eggs on the disease process. You've got a negative feedback loop that basically puts the disease on fast forward.
That leads us to the concept of brain rust, which sounds both terrifying and like a good name for a heavy metal band.
Brain rust, coming soon to a concert hall near you. But in scientific terms, the process is called ferroptosis, a type of cell death linked to iron. Think of it like an internal rusting phenomenon in your neurons.
So it's basically your cells oxidizing from too much iron exposure?
Exactly. Iron plus oxygen plus certain types of fats in your cell membranes create a perfect storm. Neurons are loaded with polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are absolutely essential for proper brain function, but also vulnerable to oxidative damage. When iron is off the charts, these fats get attacked, setting off ferroptosis, cellular meltdown basically.
So the more iron that piles up, the more the brain's basically corroding from the inside out?
Yes, it's exactly like that mental image of rust creeping across a metal surface. Over time, that leads to neuron death, eventually manifesting as memory issues, confusion, and all those other Alzheimer's symptoms.
And apparently advanced imaging has shown that in Alzheimer's affected brains, iron gets stuck in that more oxidized form, Fe3+, near those sticky amyloid plaques.
Indeed. Researchers are like, hey, let's point a fancy microscope at this brain tissue, and they see iron 3+ building up in regions heavily laced with amyloid plaques. That's the more reactive form, tied closely to oxidative stress.
But ironically, in ferroptosis, we see a shift in the opposite direction.
They actually observed that while overall Fe3+ was higher in Alzheimer's brains, in ferroptosis scenarios, the ratio could shift in the other direction. It goes to show iron redox chemistry is complicated. But the overarching theme remains: there's a big imbalance, and that imbalance is trouble.
So, to sum up, we want enough iron to maintain function, but not so much that your brain cells are corroding?
Precisely. And this goes beyond the brain. Iron overload can cause damage throughout the body: cancer risks, diabetes complications, even issues with bone health. The synergy of too much iron and free radicals is basically the equivalent of a bull rampaging through a china shop.
Good metaphor. So, let's talk about how people can keep tabs on their iron without turning into that bull.
A great start is checking ferritin levels with a blood test. Ferritin is like the storage locker for iron. If you can track that, You know if your iron's running high. Most folks aim for ferritin levels in the ballpark of 20 to 40 nanograms per milliliter. Under 20, you risk deficiency. Above 100, you're looking at possible overload or inflammation, maybe both.
People might say, so I just need to eat less iron-rich food, but it's a bit more involved, right?
Correct. Genetic factors can make some individuals prone to collecting extra iron. Also, once men stop losing blood and once women pass menopause, there's often less blood loss going on. No monthly iron purge means iron can gradually build up.
Let's not forget lifestyle factors that flood us with iron. For instance, if someone's cooking everything in a cast iron pan.
And if they're eating a lot of processed foods enriched with iron, that can pile up. Even well water with high iron content can tip the scales. Plus, drinking alcohol regularly boosts your iron absorption.
So, ironically, sipping wine with your steak might increase how much iron your body decides to keep.
If your dinner plate looks like red meat, spinach, a side of cast iron shavings, plus a glass of Pinot Noir, okay, the shavings part is a joke, but you get the idea.
Now, if you suspect you're on the high side, or your ferritin test confirms it, how do you lighten that iron load?
One of the simplest ways is to donate blood. That's basically letting some of that iron out. Men might do it 2 to 4 times a year. Women post-menopause could do similarly. If donation is restricted for some reason, doctors can prescribe therapeutic phlebotomy, which accomplishes the same thing.
So, there's a built-in advantage if you're a good Samaritan who donates blood. You're helping someone else while keeping your iron in check.
It's a win-win. Unless you have a condition like congestive heart failure or severe COPD, where fluid shifts could be a concern, donating blood is generally a straightforward strategy.
But there's also this interplay with copper, right? Because if you're low on copper, your body might mishandle iron.
Copper deficiency plus iron overload is like the dynamic duo you never asked for. Copper is crucial for iron metabolism. If you're running low on copper, you can't shuffle iron around properly.
So people might benefit from copper-rich foods or a copper bisglycinate supplement, something in the range of 3 to 4 milligrams a day.
Yes, that's often enough to support the body's iron handling skills. And it's wise to look at natural sources of copper, too, like bee pollen, grass-fed beef liver, delicious if you're into that sort of thing, and acerola cherries. Additionally, retinol from organ meats helps with copper utilization.
So the moral of the story is, you don't want to starve yourself of iron, but you also don't want to flood your tissues with it. Check your ferritin, consider donating blood, watch your copper, and maybe lighten up on the cast iron cookware.
That's the gist. And while we're on the topic of synergy, adequate calcium intake can help reduce iron overload. But it's best from whole food sources, like raw dairy, if that suits you. When calcium is too low, your parathyroid hormone rises and encourages more iron storage. So that's another piece of the puzzle.
Let's refocus on Alzheimer's for a moment. People might wonder, if I manage my iron carefully, can I reduce my risk?
It looks that way. Obviously, it's never just one factor. Alzheimer's is complex, but high iron levels create an environment of chronic oxidative stress. That's like fueling a fire that can damage neurons. Minimizing that stress might well keep your brain cells healthier longer.
And the approach is pretty accessible. There's no complicated formula, no exotic magical fruit that cures everything. It's basically about balance.
People get excited about the next big superfood, but sometimes the answer is more straightforward. Keep an eye on the things that can accumulate in your body, like iron. We are dynamic ecosystems, and our cells thrive when we don't let essential minerals go rogue.
Is it fair to say that iron is the perfect example of enough is enough, but more is not better?
That's a fantastic way to put it. Our cells need enough iron to stay energetic and keep us cognitively sharp. But if we overshoot, we risk that brain rust scenario.
Let's highlight one more interesting point. Even though Alzheimer's is center stage, iron overload is also connected to Parkinson's and Huntington's, among other neurodegenerative diseases.
It's not just memory issues we're talking about. It could also be movement disorders or other forms of cognitive decline. Because the principle is the same, too much iron plus susceptible neurons leads to trouble.
If you're out there listening and you're thinking, wow, I've never given iron a second thought beyond preventing anemia, welcome to the next level.
The conversation around iron tends to fixate on deficiency. That's still relevant for some groups, but for others, especially men and older women, it's often the opposite problem.
Let's give a quick recap to tie it up. Iron is vital for transporting oxygen and forming neurotransmitters. But with age, or due to genetic tendencies, or dietary habits, iron can accumulate in the brain. Research points to a strong link between iron overload and Alzheimer's, with key proteins like amyloid precursor protein playing a role in iron mismanagement.
That mismanagement can accelerate damage through ferroptosis, a fancy name for iron-driven oxidative cell death. And advanced imaging has shown that Phe3+, the more oxidized form, tends to pile up near amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's brains.
It's not limited to the brain. Excess iron can raise risks for cancer, type 2 diabetes, bone health issues, and more, largely because free iron triggers the production of hydroxyl free radicals, some of the most damaging ones known.
So keep an eye on your ferritin levels. Aim for somewhere around 20 to 40 nanograms per milliliter. If you're pushing over 100, it might be time to consider strategies like donating blood or therapeutic phlebotomy.
Don't overlook copper. If you're low in copper, you might handle iron poorly, so either supplement or eat copper-rich foods. Same goes for getting enough retinol, often from beef liver or organ meats, to support that process.
And consider your calcium intake. Letting your body slip into a calcium deficiency can trigger higher iron storage, so don't forget those good quality dairy products, if they suit your body, and maybe toss in some eggshell powder if you're adventurous.
With these steps, we keep iron in its rightful place, fueling our cells rather than sinking them like a ton of metal. And hopefully, this translates into a healthier brain well into old age.
That's the ultimate goal. Nobody wants to trade short-term convenience for long-term cognitive decline. A little vigilance now can save you a world of trouble later.
The big takeaway is that self-awareness about mineral balance is part of modern healthy living.
It's easy to forget that these internal processes can shape our future health more than the occasional fast food meal. The older we get, the more these subtle factors accumulate.
One more tip. Watch your environment for hidden iron sources, like well water or certain processed foods. It's about the total picture.
Indeed, there's never just one source. Even small increments add up over years or decades. Keeping an eye on it helps you enjoy that perfect equilibrium of energy, brain function, and overall well-being.
Iron is your ally until it overstays its welcome. Then it could turn into a dark force pushing you toward degenerative disease. On that note, thank you for tuning in to Cellular Wisdom. We hope this conversation illuminated some lesser-known angles on iron, the essential mineral that can make or break your health. Remember, sometimes the smallest elements in our bodies tell the biggest stories.
I'm Alara Sky, encouraging you to keep your chemistry balanced and your curiosity unbounded.
And I'm Ethan Foster, reminding you that life is mostly about moderation and occasionally about giving blood. Tune in next time for another exploration into the unseen realms of health. Until then, stay curious and stay well.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe now and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.